weapons. And what is Russia's threshold to pull the nuclear trigger? Our next report gets you the details.
The world has witnessed the power of nuclear bombs. From the time the nuclear bomb was invented, the United States is the only country to have used a nuclear bomb. When Washington dropped the little boy and fat man on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, sparking off a nuclear holocaust. An estimated 226,000 people were killed, vaporized in searing flash waves of energy that swept through the two Japanese cities as the unforgettable mushroom clouds towered over. And now the world appears to be inexorably marching towards another nuclear conflict. Having forgotten what the use of nuclear weapons could do to the human race. The Russia-Ukraine war has now dragged on for 2 years, and on the 13th of March, the Russian President Vladimir Putin again reiterated a line that he has often used before, that weapons exist to be used.
Well, weapons exist to be used. We have our own principles. What do they mean? That we are ready to use weapons, including any weapons, including those you mentioned. If we are talking about the existence of the Russian state, about damaging our sovereignty and independence.
The unflinching American support to the defense of Ukraine, for the moment, has turned into lip service. But Emmanuel Macron, the leader of another nuclear power, France, has again reiterated that sending Western troops to fight Russia must not be ruled out.
We have one goal. Russia cannot and must not win this war. Since 2 years, we have been helping Ukraine, and if things were to get out of hand, it would only be the responsibility of Russia. If we decide today to be weak while you face someone that does not have limits, that crossed all the limits that he has told, and we tell him we won't go further than that, we won't be deciding peace but defeat.
Pitched battles are being fought along the front lines. Ukraine, which has been outgunned and outmaneuvered, is clearly on the back foot in the land battles. But in the Black Sea, Kiev, with the use of its naval drones, has been sinking Russian warships at a rate of 1 per month in the last few months. So what is Russia's threshold to pull the nuclear trigger? Well, according to some leaked Kremlin documents, Russia can pull the nuclear trigger if 20% of Russia's strategic ballistic missile submarines are destroyed, if 30% of Russia's nuclear-powered attack submarines are put out of action, if just 3 or more of its naval cruisers are sunk, if 3 or more of its airfields are flattened, or if Russia's main and reserve coastal command centers come under simultaneous attacks. At this moment, Russia is estimated to have a total of 5,977 nuclear warheads. And of this, an estimated 1,500 Russian warheads are said to be deployed in missile silos or on its nuclear bombers or on its submarines in the sea. To dismiss Putin's nuclear saber-rattling as rhetoric during war would be a fatal mistake, as never before since the end of the Second World War has the threat of a nuclear Armageddon been more real.
Yemen's Iran-aligned Houthis are proving to be a bit of a thorn in the flesh of the United States and its ally Israel. Since November last year, they've targeted Israeli-owned, flagged or operated ships, or the ships that are heading to Israeli ports. Raising the stakes in the ongoing Red Sea crisis, the Houthis on the 14th of March claimed to have a new hypersonic missile in their arsenal, and this was according to the Russian state media. No evidence, however, has been provided for the claim though. The Houthis in the recent past have spoken of introducing military surprises in their Red Sea operations. But how substantial is this claim, and what possible implication does it have on the ongoing conflict in the Red Sea and beyond? Our next report gets more details.
The Houthis, officially known as Ansar Allah, have attacked Israeli, US and UK ships since November last year, with the stated aim of forcing Israel to end its offensive in Gaza, launched in response to Hamas's October 7th attack on southern Israel. There, the rebels have also fired missiles toward Israel, which have mostly either been intercepted or have fallen short. Neither do they have a navy nor weapons with far-reaching capability. But all of this could potentially change if the Russian state media is to be believed. On Thursday, it was reported that the Houthis' missile forces successfully tested a missile capable of reaching speeds up to Mach 8 and running on solid fuel. Mach 8 is 8 times the speed of sound. An additional of a hypersonic missile to the arsenal of the Houthi could pose a more formidable challenge to the air defense systems employed by the US and its allies, including Israel. Reportedly, the Houthis intend to begin manufacturing the hypersonic missiles to be used in attacks in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, as well as targets in Israel. The development is not entirely unexpected, considering it was only last month that the Houthis' leader, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, had spoken about introduction of military surprises in their Red Sea operations.
Our military operations will continue and advance, and we have surprises that our enemies will not expect at all. We don't want to talk about it. We want it to start with actions and follow it up with talking. And it will be a surprise for our enemies, far from the expectations of our enemies and our allies.
Iran, which is widely considered to be Houthis' main benefactor, claims to have a hypersonic weapon. In June last year, Iran had unveiled its Fatah missile, described as a hypersonic. Hypersonic missiles, which fly at speeds higher than Mach 5, pose crucial challenges to the missile defense systems. Their irregular flight path and the ability to change directions makes them far more difficult to intercept. Will hypersonic missiles in the hands of the belligerent Houthis prove to be the game changer in the Red Sea conflict and beyond? Well, as of now, the Russian media report has certainly raised an alarm.
The Republic of Sudan, Africa's third largest country by size, has been ravaged by war for the past 11 months. The conflict between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF, erupted on the 15th of April. The RSF, held by Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, and the army led by Abdel Fattah al-Burhan had shared power with the civilians after the 2019 overthrow of the former strongman Omar al-Bashir. And in 2021, the army and the RSF had joined hands together to stage a coup. But relations soured between the army and the RSF over the planned integration of the paramilitary RSF into the regular army, an internationally backed political transition plan. Since the fighting began in the middle of April, it has resulted in the displacement of over 8 million people. It has left the capital city Khartoum in complete ruins. It has precipitated a humanitarian crisis that has also triggered the ethnically driven killings in Darfur. Now, the most significant advance against the RSF paramilitary, the Sudanese army on the 12th of March claims to have recaptured the headquarters of the state broadcaster in Omdurman. Now, the RSF had held the headquarters since just after the fighting erupted in the middle of April last year. Our next report gets more details.
The Game of Thrones in the strategically located and agriculturally rich Sudan took a major turn this week. After 11 months of intense civil war with the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, Sudanese army achieved a symbolic breakthrough on Tuesday by recapturing the headquarters of Sudan's radio and television in Omdurman, a city across the River Nile from capital Khartoum. Interestingly, despite taking control of the headquarters last April, RSF had not been able to transmit from it. State television and radio had continued to broadcast pro-army content from Port Sudan. Tuesday's seizure is a major victory for the Sudanese army because the RSF were using it for military operations. Ever since the fighting broke out in mid-April, the army and the RSF have battled for control of Khartoum and the nearby cities. United Nations Secretary General on the 7th of March had urged the warring parties for a ceasefire during the holy month of Ramadan.
It is time to silence the guns and raise the volume for peace. In just days, the holy month of Ramadan will commence. So from this chamber today, I'm making an appeal. I call on all parties in Sudan to honor the values of Ramadan by honoring a Ramadan cessation of hostilities. This cessation of hostilities must lead to a definitive silencing of the guns across the country and set out a firm path towards lasting peace for the Sudanese people. The values of Ramadan must prevail.
Despite the calls for a ceasefire, intense fighting has continued unabated. Sudanese army, reliant on air power and heavy artillery to counter the RSF's infantry advantage, ended up deploying drones in Omdurman in an attempt to regain lost ground. United Nations estimates that because of the conflict, nearly 25 million people, or half of Sudan's population, is in need of aid.
Available food is not enough for us. We have corn, but we don't have the money to grind it. And we don't have the money to buy cooking utensils. We can't buy onions or meat. The food that we have been given is not enough. The situation is difficult, and here there are no jobs.
The situation prior to the conflict was grim, with about a quarter of Sudan's population facing acute hunger. The deteriorating security situation has only imperiled the lives of thousands trapped. Both the warring generals Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and Hamadan Dagolo have been positioning themselves as saviors of Sudan and guardians of democracy. In a country which has experienced only brief democratic interludes, this latest conflict has not only diminished any hopes of a transition to democracy, but has created a humanitarian crisis which is only worsening by the day.
The Caribbean nation of Haiti is in the grip of its most acute humanitarian crisis since the devastating earthquake in 2010, which had taken the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. Politically as well, it isn't faring much better. Elections haven't been held since 2016, and the presidency remains vacant. The security situation here has in fact plummeted since the assassination of the former president Jovenel Moïse in July 2021, and it is now comparable to a country at war. Gangs have launched coordinated attacks on key facilities over the past couple of weeks, ultimately forcing the country's Prime Minister Ariel Henry to pledge that he would, of course, step down. Our next report gets you more details.
For over 2 weeks now, Haiti has been rocked by gang violence and the ensuing political instability. On the 29th of February, a coordinated attack was launched by multiple armed groups in a bid to oust the Prime Minister, Ariel Henry. The Prime Minister was in Kenya at the time, finalizing details for the deployment of a foreign armed force to Haiti to combat the gangs. He has since struggled to return home and is currently stranded in the US territory of Puerto Rico. As unrest spread, a notorious gang leader, Jimmy Cherizier, also known as Barbecue, warned that the chaos engulfing the capital, Port-au-Prince, will lead to possible genocide and civil war unless the Prime Minister steps down. Police stations, a police academy, and the international airport, Toussaint-Louverture, were targeted. 2 of the country's biggest prisons were stormed by armed gangs, resulting in the escape of 4,000 inmates. Finally, on the 11th of March, Haiti's unelected Prime Minister, 74-year-old neurosurgeon Ariel Henry, pledged to step down once a transition council and an interim Prime Minister is appointed.
After the Council of Ministers, it's been agreed to set up a presidential transitional council. Once chosen, the council will govern over different sectors of national life. Haiti wants peace. Haiti needs stability. Haiti needs sustainable development. Haiti needs to rebuild democratic institutions. I'm asking all Haitians to remain calm and do everything they can for peace and stability to come back as fast as possible for the good of the country.
Allegedly, armed gangs massively grew their wealth, influence and territory under Henri's administration. Henri's resignation, however, has resulted in an uncertainty hanging over Haiti's political future. Reportedly, some political parties have rejected the plan to create a presidential council that would manage the transition. And in yet another blow following Prime Minister Henri's announcement that he would tender his resignation, Kenya has decided to pause its deployment of 1,000 police officers. The US State Department, though, remained optimistic.
What the Kenyan government said in its statement is that they have to have a government with which to collaborate, which has been an important part of their understanding. It's a perfectly natural thing to expect, that they want to know that there's a government that can host them, that can make a request for them to deploy a mission. So right now, as you wait for the appointment of a presidential transition council, which would appoint then a new government, a new prime minister, I think that's an appropriate step for the Kenyan government to take. But we think those are steps that will happen, as I said, in the very near future, and that would pave the way for this mission to go forward without delay.
The wave of gang violence that swarmed Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince, on the 29th of February has stoked more fears of a humanitarian crisis. In a country of 11 million people, 4.35 million people face acute food insecurity. Even more worrying is the fact that 1 million of Haitians are merely a step away from famine. The gang violence has resulted in the internal displacement of 350,000 people, with more than 15,000 of them in the last fortnight. With the fear of gang attacks looming and the political future remaining uncertain, Haiti is placed rather precariously, and the next few days would be worth keeping an eye on.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of World at War. And if you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback or suggestions, please feel free to do so on the ID that you're seeing on your screens. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you.